All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Hammer and Chisel Performance Podcast. Real quick, you guys, please forgive me for my very blank backdrop right now. My wife and I just moved back to North Carolina. We're getting settled in, but the show must go on. So I promise you I'll have this place looking pretty here in the next few weeks. Okay, so the guest I have on today is a guy I'm really excited to talk to. He's someone I've been following for the past couple years. Really enjoyed his content, agree with a lot of his philosophies and criticisms of what is going on in the fitness industry and the world of training. Now, for my audience, any of you who follow the fitness industry, strength and conditioning, sports performance, any of those areas in the social media space, you're probably already familiar with this guy. If you're not, by the end of this podcast, I'm sure you'll be compelled to go check him out and see a lot more of his content. He's a little bit of a provocateur, ruffles some feathers on occasion. I really see him more as a voice of reason, if anything. But Angus Bradley, welcome to the podcast, man.
Hey, thank you very much for having me. I'm stoked to be here. And just as you were sort of writing off your podcast background, it made me a little bit insecure. I've been podcasting for years now. And actually, no, I did have a legit studio prior to COVID. But yeah, since then, I just haven't made any effort to get any sort of exciting background. So maybe that's a change I can make over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I've thought about it. And at the end of the day, hey, I mean, 70% of the people are probably just listening to the audio of this anyway. And I'm not a full-time podcaster in the sense that like this is my main thing with multi-cameras and a producer and doing the high production value stuff. At the end of the day, I just like having interesting guests on from all realms of the world of performance and sports and training, having an interesting conversation and getting some great perspectives to my audience, getting introduced to their audiences. I learn something from every guest I have on, and as well as I'm sure my audience does.
Oh, yeah, it's such a good format. And that's the thing. You don't need to go full Rogan spec to make a tremendously valuable podcast.
Yeah, for sure. So in this podcast, guys, we're going to talk training. We're going to talk some trends in the fitness industry and sports performance and training as a whole that Angus has been very critical of, and I wholeheartedly agree with these complaints. So we're going to get into a little bit of a shit talking episode here on some trends and dogma in the industry. But first of all, for my audience who is not super aware of you or your background, do you mind giving the people a quick background on yourself?
Yeah, sure. So started out just the classic personal trainer route. Came from a very sporty family. But so coming from a sporty, health conscious family, I've never really had to worry about my weight. I'm identified as your typical hard gainer ectomorph sort of thing as well. So while that might not be a gift in terms of working in the fitness industry, making it really easy to put on muscle, I've never had to worry about watching what I eat to stay in shape or anything like that. So I really struggled initially because, again, there's such an overlap in the personal training, commercial gym trainer space, and it's seen as very fat loss driven. That's what a lot of people want. That's what you're told to sell. Really struggle with that. So I was sort of always encouraging my clients to play a sport. I was like, you were telling me you didn't want to look like a bodybuilder anyway. You just wanted to look like an athlete. You say you like playing sport with your mates on the weekends. Let's just focus on training for that. And obviously that'll, push us towards more health seeking behavior. My background, so as far as education, I have my personal training certs, but I actually went to university for journalism. But yeah, just the whole time, that was just sort of satisfying my parents because they were really proud that I got into uni. The whole time I secretly wanted to be a personal trainer. But again, I saw the look on my parents' face when my brother told them that he was going to become a personal trainer when he finished high school. And I was like, fuck, I just can't do it to them. So I lied about dropping out of uni to my parents for a while. And kept that a little bit of a secret. But then, was working in gyms in a face-to-face setting for about 5 or 6 years, and then had always dipped my toe into content creation. But then when gyms shut down in 2020, I just had this moment where I was like, what am I doing? Like, I know that social media is such a powerful tool for coaches, especially who want to grow their business. I also know that the fitness industry is not a meritocracy. Like I've seen, especially strength and conditioning. I like the idea of working in strength and conditioning, and especially in Australia where pro sport is a lot smaller, there's a lot less opportunities. There's just so much nepotism, and like I don't fault people for that. I want to hire someone I know as well. Like I totally get it, but just trying to honestly analyze the environment. There was just so many things that drew me into content creation. I'm a pretty opinionated person. And yeah, so that took off. A lot more people were looking at their phones in 2020. And I was very consistent with my content creation. And then that led to a bunch more opportunities, a lot of expanding, working with different types of athletes, getting to do a bit of consulting into pro sport, and just sort of developing now the business that is general physical preparation, which there's kind of a 50%, there's an education arm of the business, and then there's a training arm of the business. And then there's sort of, I guess, the two sort of, not value system, saying as far as the impact and the mission statement of general physical preparation. On the personal training side, my desire is to push every personal trainer to broaden their skill set and to adopt the skills more of an S&C, because I just think that that's a better chance of clicking with the general public rather than just sort of pushing everyone into like a shitty bodybuilding prep. And then when it comes to strength and conditioning, I just feel like the field is way too fractalized. We have football S&C coaches, basketball S&C coaches, track S&C coaches. Now we've got fucking surfing S&C coaches since it got put in the Olympics. I think that our understanding of humans is so primitive and it's advanced so much in the last couple of decades, and that people just haven't been paying enough attention to that. You know, we're dealing with humans first and foremost, like that's 99% of us. So I just think we should be focusing a little bit more on that rather than fractalizing off in our silos. And I think there's a time and place for that, but I think it's largely unhelpful because, again, what I noticed is the basketball guys, track guys, strength sports guys, a lot of them had the same stupid questions. I was like, let's just get together.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, I think one of the things, the overarching themes that you and I very much agree on when it comes to training philosophy in general is just taking a very general, holistic approach to training. I mean, at the end of the day, no matter what sport you play or whatever goal you have, at the end of the day, the human organism and human physiology is the same across the board. And you know,
You know, legs, make them bigger, stronger, faster, do it for longer. I'm like, man, just that's good.
yeah. And, you know, I come from a strength and conditioning background. So you and I are a little bit similar in that we started off with coaching on the floor, face to face with, you know, athletes and clients, and have since walked away from that and gotten into more of the remote space, the content creation space. And, you know, some of the frustrations that I had in strength and conditioning were some of the things that you said there. It's just so much dogma in it. You know, there's all this like guruism and just this over focus on sports specificity. You know, all the politics that go into strength and conditioning. And like you said, I mean, it's not a meritocracy. The best coaches are not necessarily getting the big jobs. I mean, you look at you look at college football, American football, strength and conditioning, and a lot of the biggest jobs, and you know, I'm not talking shit about any coach in particular, but a lot of the highest paid coaches, you look at their programs and they're shit programs. They're just guys who have tons of connections in the football world, who had the right friends, who just climbed the ranks that way. And then meanwhile, you look at some of the smaller, low resource programs, and that's where some of the absolute best coaches in strength and conditioning are, you know. So it was a frustrating field to be in for that reason. And, you know, the fitness industry as a whole is very much the same. You see so many people with huge platforms who are just spouting off on just stupid misinformation all the time.
Do you follow, because I know you brought up James Smith, the British bloke who's more involved in personal training. Are you a fan of the other James Smith as well? They call him like James
Thinker?
the Thinker. Yeah.
Yeah, so I for he's what a very unique guy, you know, listening to him articulate his thoughts and philosophies. I first heard him on the Mark Bell podcast years and years ago. I haven't really seen much of him in recent years.
Now, I haven't heard a peep out of him since The Governing Dynamics of Coaching, or like whatever his last book was. But yeah, he's sort of, a little bit more one of those like industry legends, I guess, where like a lot of older heads know him. But yeah, I feel like there's a bit of a generation gap forming currently with the new crop who haven't had enough James Smith exposure. But yeah, I always love his criticisms of it, where he's sort of just talking about just structural issues within the pro sports hierarchy. And I think his whole pitch of having the S&C coach be the head coach or performance coach as the head coach, and then demoting what we currently look at as the head coach to the tactics coach. But I completely agree with his frustration that a lot of the time, like as an S&C coach, your boss doesn't even understand what it looks like when you're doing a good job. It's just like, well, I know a back squat doesn't directly correlate to, football numbers or whatever other sport it is, still a useful exercise. But like, again, head coach sees numbers going up and they're like, good. Like, it's just, you're in a difficult position.
There are football strength and conditioning programs where the strength coach literally has a quota that he has to meet. He's got this immense pressure. I've just got to get 40 guys on the team, power cleaning 140 kilos, or I've got to get, 15 405-pound bench pressers, and you're just chasing numbers, and, just technique is going to shit because you have to hit those numbers. Otherwise you're going to get fired. And now one thing I will say about being a strength coach in sports is it's not just about putting together a good program. The impact that a good strength coach can have on a team will come in a lot of the intangibles, just the culture setting, the discipline, the accountability, instilling toughness and work ethic, in the players and the athletes. And that's where some of the art of coaching comes in, which I think that's a component that's getting lost in today's world of remote coaching. Just people who maybe they know a thing or two about programming, but they don't know anything about communicating with human beings, articulating coaching points to human beings.
That was something that I really struggle with getting into online coaching, because I've sort of took it for granted that when you're in a face-to-face setting, I mean, a lot of coaches don't even have the social skills or the recognition that it's important there. But even when you understand the importance of soft skills, implementing that in a remote coaching model is like something that I had trouble with, especially in my initial run of online coaching. I've since made some changes to my system that I think make it a little bit better, like just doing video check-ins like this, instead of just texting back and always sort of communicating with them like that. But there's still sort of gaps in it. And then, like I said, I don't think there's anything wrong in particular with online coaching, but it has tempted me a little bit to get a little bit more back into the face-to-face side of things.
Yeah, when it comes to training, you'll never quite be able to recreate being in the gym with someone, because you can actually
Like sending you a PR, texting you a PR versus being there for the PR, none of that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just being able to coach movement, being able to push someone. I mean, it's like training alone versus training with a training partner. Having the training partner, you're always going to train harder. You're going to get a better workout in. And it's the same thing with coaching. So just going a little bit more into your origins as a personal trainer. Was it tough your first couple years? Did you ultimately get to a point where you had a good base of clients? What was your experience kind of like as a personal trainer?
Okay, so I actually false started the story a bit. So the people are probably pretty familiar with Sydney. It's the biggest city in Australia. And that's where I ended up building my first successful personal training business. Prior to that, I started working in a gym in my hometown, which is Wollongong, which is a couple of hours south of Sydney. It's a much smaller population. And especially at the time, this was over 10 years ago now, personal training just wasn't much of a thing in my hometown. So I really, really struggled. I mean, the warehouse gym that I was paying rent at was only $50 a week, but I was even missing that. One of the owners of the gym had a cafe that he gave me a job at, punching out coffees for people. So I could sort of make the gym rent. But just as someone who is, essentially like a broke student or a student dropout, it's just all my friends were students or musicians or broke athletes. Like, it was really, really hard for me to network and develop some initial lead generation, because that's all you're looking for as a new trainer. You're like, man, just give me 10 clients. I know I can do a good job with them. Then I can get some results. Then I have social proof, or even if my marketing is shit, at least maybe I can get some referrals because I've done such a good job with them. I just couldn't get it off the ground though, just due to a couple of those circumstances, and probably a genuine lack of skill at the time as well. And I had an argument with the owner of the gym because I called him out like an idiot because he was chatting shit about nutrition. And I obviously, had opinions on things and couldn't keep my mouth shut. So I got kicked out of that gym. And then I had to go to Sydney. But so I didn't have money. I was living with my parents at the time in Wollongong. I didn't have money to rent in Sydney. So I was commuting 4 hours a day, waking up at 4 a.m., getting home at 10 p.m., training fucking no one, just walking the gym floor, trying to sort of develop some sort of a sales game or just some fucking social skills. The gym in Sydney, it was an amazing place to build a business. I honestly think if you couldn't build a personal training business in this environment, you're never going to make it. It was a really solid sized commercial gym under 2 big buildings that were owned by banks. So obviously you've got people earning enough money directly above you, that they can afford personal training. But the gym rent was $450, so that was a little bit expensive as well. Again, you could charge a decent rate, but I think it was probably 2 years of grinding in that setup, 6 days a week before I was meeting rent comfortably. And again, it was just a skill issue on my behalf. Like I got into this because I like training people. Then I realized like the whole E-Myth thing, you get forced into entrepreneurship sometimes based on your job choices. So it was really, really tough for the first couple of years. It was also a really interesting setting in that Fitness First or the commercial gym that I was in. There was 32 other sole traders under the one roof, which I wouldn't think is an uncommon amount of trainers to have under one roof in a big city commercial gym in the US. But and that was the best and worst thing about it as well, because it was such a mixed bag from the elite of the fucking elite, like some genuine industry legends in that crowd, and just some of the biggest lunatics you'll ever meet, like the functional patterns crowd and like all the weird functional trainers or some sort of diet zealot or something like that. But then, like I said, people like Graham Morris, Hattie Boydell came out of my gym, James Smith, Duran Cartel came out of my gym. I came out of that Fitness First. It was, yeah, like I said, it was such a crazy environment to sort of try and work things out.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. So I had a little bit of an advantage getting into coaching in terms of being able to generate leads and clients because I played football. I had an audience already. I had a following. I had some name recognition. And then working in football strength and conditioning, I was able to be a player and then through my connections, leverage an internship as a strength and conditioning coach and work my way up. So over this time, I was able to get a decent following on social media, get some name recognition. I was competing in powerlifting and strength sports. And then I'm 6'7". My physique stands out. So I had right. It was easy for me to initially draw attention, get eyes on me and generate leads. Now for a guy like you, who's just kind of starting from scratch, like how does a personal trainer without some of those advantages go about initially getting clients in the first place, especially in a super competitive gym like you just described?
Yeah. So, I mean, if I wish I knew this from the start, because I actually had advantages, and you in your environment, you had advantages in football, but you might even be at a disadvantage in some ways in a commercial gym corporate setting, because they're people a lot of the time you realize they don't want a trainer that's aspirational, or some people do. A lot of people want a trainer that's relatable, makes them feel safe, and just like I said, someone that they feel like they can relate to, because I think there's a lot of people where they don't see how they could ever be a fitness person. And then they look at someone like me, maybe we play the same video games, maybe like the same sort of nerdy shit, but they see me as someone who sort of has their shit together as a fitness person. They're like, oh, maybe I can be a fitness person. Like World of Warcraft is a classic one. If you want to like network with the tech nerds and go, yeah, like I'm a bit of a jock, but I love me World of Warcraft. And they're like, oh my God, like we can talk about that in between sets. He's just like me for real. Whereas you, man, I've seen people like you on the commercial gym floor. And if you aren't smiling and waving constantly, everyone on that sorry, not everyone, so many people on that gym floor are going to assume that you're an asshole, that you're obsessed with yourself, that you're big, tall. So there's some natural intimidating stuff you've probably been dealing with your whole life. But even just like really jacked guys, I worked with a guy that was an IFBB pro. And again, he had to really go around and be like, hey, everyone, like, hey, it's all good. Like,
Yeah.
I won't turn you into an IFBB pro. Like, can you see that I'm good at this? I just make the muscles a little bit bigger. So once you sort of become aware of that, you just realize that like, you just got to be yourself. You be yourself. It's personal training, and just sort of push that, and that will help you connect with, I mean, not just people on a higher level, but you'll connect with better people. Because again, me at the start, I was trying to be who I thought I should be, and I didn't pick up as many clients. And also the clients I got were the worst fucking people. I didn't vibe with them whatsoever. Had nothing to talk about with them in between sets and things like that. Where as soon as I just relaxed and got more comfortable with myself, attracted more clients, attracted more like-minded clients, enjoyed training them more, and then it was just off from there.
Yeah. You made a really good point there, which, isn't it funny how such a big part of coaching or training really comes down to the relationship side of things? Like in a personal training setting, a lot of these people, they're not aspiring to be a bodybuilder or do anything extraordinary with their physique or their performance, but they want to have someone that they trust, that they, like you said, they relate to, they enjoy spending their time with, they feel comfortable around that person. And you're right. I mean, like me, I always had to fight the stigma as a coach as getting pigeonholed into the big dumb meathead box.
Big dumb meathead. Yeah.
The 6'7" big former football player, big dumb meathead, just knows weight room. And I always had to fight that stigma and had to show employers and coaches like, no, I've got some intelligence. I can program the field work. Also, I can communicate and articulate the thoughts and coaching points and all these things. So, like being able to do a podcast like this and being on social media and speaking and showing the human side, that goes a long way for prospective clients to say, hey, like I relate to this guy. I like this guy. He seems like a good dude. He's someone that I would want coaching me.
100%. Yeah.
So you'd mentioned, some of these big time personal trainers that were in your gym, and, James Smith, the personal trainer, James Smith, he's got a few million followers on Instagram. He's become this huge name. How do personal trainers go about, how did a guy like that just explode the way he did?
So, I mean, when he came to the gym, it wasn't pre-Instagram era, but it was before you could put videos on Instagram, I think. And it was when Facebook Live was really popping off. And I just remember in peak hour at the gym, he was on Facebook Live the whole time because that was peak hour for his British Facebook audience. So we were like, what's this guy doing? He's missing peak hour on the gym floor. Like, you should be either training people or this is peak time for prospecting for new clients on the gym floor. But he was so unashamed and he was so consistent. And I think those are two qualities that I think a lot of people struggle with. So many trainers who are trying to be a legit trainer, especially back in the day, I think there's a bit more acceptance of everyone being a content creator now. But when I came into the industry, people like, yeah, serious coaches, you just do it based on results and word of mouth. And you're like, yeah, but like, how is that ever going to compete with how much social media can explode your business? And people just weren't consistent. Like, again, it was sort of like you'd be embarrassed roping off time in your day to make content because it's like, no, you should be, I don't know, writing programs or going to find more clients on the gym floor, or doing admin or doing some upskill or something like that. Whereas when you sort of look at what it can contribute to your business, it's fucking absurd that people don't put a little bit more of an emphasis on content creation, because at the end of the day, like we're so judgmental about it because of what we associate content creation with, but it is communication at the end of the day. It is mastering another form of communication. And that is integral, not just to coaches, but any fucking skill set. You got to be able to communicate effectively. Content creation is just an extension of that. But that was probably the biggest thing. And I would say as well, there was a stigma that the general population wasn't interested in educational-based fitness content. They just wanted to look at people with sexy abs. Again, more that aspirational thing. But that's fitness influencing and stuff like that. But as far as like getting clients, again, James Smith wasn't the most ripped personal trainer. He wasn't the most jacked. Decent looking. He was fairly charismatic and funny. And I think he lent into those things. But he was literally just trying to explain the process, educate. Because at the time, I distinctively remember every personal trainer was obsessed with counting their macros. We all knew it was calories in, calories out. But everyone still had a fear of really educating the general population on that. There was the association with calorie counting and I think disordered eating and being too skinny and sort of things like that. Whereas again, James Smith was a big part of the early on destigmatization of calorie counting and sort of things like that. So again, big focus on education, consistency, and yeah, like I said, just like actually identifying as a content creator a bit. I think like I look at, you know, how, and it's kind of bullshit and it's kind of true. People will say like, you know, Michael Jordan, is he a basketball player or is he a shoe salesman? And he's definitely a basketball player. But like, again, like if you look at where most of his money came from, you'd be like, oh, shoe salesman. And again, like it's okay to identify as a content creator. I'm not, because people, it's not content creator. People try to call me an influencer to try to shit on me. I'm like, look, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reason that I know of you and the reason that we're talking right now is through your content creation. And, you know, you're not someone I look.
It's not.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't see you as, you know, some fucking TikTok influencer. I see all the content you're putting out and you're making very good points about training and you're making very valid criticisms about things that are going on in the industry, which is why I started following you a couple years back. I've always enjoyed your content. And you know, you portray yourself as someone who's smart and reasonable about these things. And it's a very good, I'm sure, marketing tool for yourself, for your own coaching. And then it's helped you develop a name and some recognition and generate some respect within the industry. So, I mean, it's been huge. And anyone who's not leveraging social media or content creation, I mean, they're getting left in the dark ages.
But I think it's a shame because it's a lot of the self-identifying smart coaches who are in, you know, everyone, we talk about the Dunning-Kruger curve and all the overconfident, obnoxious coaches. They're the ones naturally drawn to content creation, where it's the more intelligent, reasonable coaches in the valley of despair that I'm always trying to push to make content. This is why I say everyone make content, and who I'm hoping fucking listens to me. And then they are harder to get listened. Yeah, they're those coaches that are more reasonable, that doubt themselves. I'm like, come on, like fucking use social media, please.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, my first exposure to you was seeing you criticizing the ATG and knee over toes crowd, which, oh my God, that was an absolute cult in and of itself. I mean, the amount of just like regurgitated a million profiles of everyone doing the same exact post about tib raises and knee over toe split squats and reverse Nordic. I mean, that for like a 2-year period there, it was everywhere on social media.
Driving me insane. Not only was it everywhere on social media, but at this point I started traveling around the world doing seminars. I would get stuck on people stuck next to people on planes. They're like, what do you do for a living? I was like, oh, personal trainer, S&C coach. They're like, oh, what do you think about backwards sled drags? I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ. Catch a Uber from the hotel, from the airport to my hotel. Again, get chatting to them. They're like, oh, again, ATG fare. It's just like fucking couldn't escape. It felt like I was going crazy. So that inspired all the content.
Yeah, you know, I know Ben Patrick a little bit, you know, the knee over toes guy, and he's a good dude. He's a very impressive athlete himself, and I suspect he didn't necessarily intend to create this monster that he sort of did, where, you know, the ATG protocol just became this god, this cure-all for anything knee pain, and athletes have to do this. So to see you, you know, really criticizing it and just, you know, everyone's saying like, all you need to do to fix your knee pain is do your tib raises and do your knee over toe split squats. And then you're over here saying load management.
But wasn't just the knee at that point. Like there was the knee over toe guy or 20 of them for the hip and then for the ankle and then for the low back. It was just the same protocol. I was like, fuck me. Like, and the thing that was frustrating about it is it wouldn't have been that hard just to add a little bit more nuance and to make it better. Just be like, hey, like, you know, pain and injury is complex, not always as straightforward as just regressing and progressing. Things can be a little bit more complicated than that. This specific progression routine that we parrot to everyone, it's not going to work for everyone. Some people might need something a little bit different, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're broken. Cool.
Yeah, you know, the social media and all the information that's out there on the internet, in some ways it's amazing. There's so much information out there. You can learn so much through the internet and all the information on training, rehab, all those things are put out there. But on the flip side, it is now so easy to spread misinformation and dogma. And then so many people were indoctrinated by the ATG and knee over toe stuff. And now they see this as that just this magical cure all, which I think you and I would agree on. Like, one of the things that just big picture things that annoys me the most about the world of training, the fitness industry in general, is just how binary everyone wants to make everything, how black and white people want to make everything. Tell me which foods are good, which foods are bad, what's the best exercise, what training program should I be doing, you know?
Yeah, I think it comes from, it's like a little bit of an issue I have with the evidence-based era. And it's not even just that, it's the quantitative era of fitness. Like, we've forgotten about the qualitative side of things. And it's hard to boil everything down to a data point without missing something along the way. And I think that's where a lot of the art of coaching has sort of been lost, because again, people are looking at science through the wrong lens. They're like, oh, I want to study to tell me what the optimal exercise is. All that objective data is ever going to give you is your range of good enough. So all I saw from those squats versus hip thrust studies is like, yep, both squats and hip thrusts grow my glutes. How I work out and there's a difference of like fucking millimeters or something that's completely negligible between them. How I'm going to work out which one to give my client or which one is optimal is by talking to them. What are their actual goals? Do you want to grow your quads as well? What equipment do you have access to? What do you like more? And like, those things are going to lead to way more optimal outcomes than any minor differences that we might get out of a few data points comparing the exercises, again, in a quantitative setting.
Yeah, the subjective experience of training is an important factor. So asking someone, "Hey, what do you enjoy doing?" and building a training program around something that you know they're going to like doing. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. That's going to go a long way. You're always going to get better results. I would rather give someone, a program that's, 80% off, 80% optimal, but they're going to love doing it. They're going to be motivated to do it. They're going to train hard, as opposed to giving them this textbook perfect 100% optimal program that they don't enjoy doing. They don't quite get it. Then the outcomes are always way worse. You got to take the human experience into account with all this stuff.
And that's it. And like, it is a bit of a mismatch, because again, like, when you think about like why someone would get attracted to sports sides and those sorts of things, it's because they want to be objective and because they want a number crunch. But then the more and more we've done like digging in that space and understanding what humans are at our core, it's just like, oh no, we are these cute little creatures where our feelings matter about things. And like, it's cool, but it's just not what a bunch of people signed up for. This whole like allostatic system, a lot of people can't wrap their heads around it and just don't want to deal with things like that. So I'm sympathetic to it, but then you have to acknowledge what we're dealing with at the end of the day and just be honest.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it really seems like one of the ways to get ahead on social media in terms of getting views and engagement and following is to take like a hard stance on one end of the spectrum, to have a very polarizing opinion or a very niche focus, saying like, this is the thing you need to be doing, like this is the way to do it, or this is the series of exercises you need to do, this is the way that you need to diet. Like, just selling out on this like one specific point and pushing it hard seems to be a way that a lot of people have kind of gotten ahead in terms of building a following. But then it just you just start spreading misinformation. You start selling, you start convincing people that people get more bought into the binary, the black and white, the dogma, and all these things. And they're convinced that there's this one way they have to do it and anything else is wrong. And that's one of the negatives about the content creation space and some of these big voices that have been platformed.
Yeah. And that's why, like, they are tricky topics to approach on social media, but I try to dip into them at times, just talking about things like dynamic systems theory and just this idea that there's always multiple solutions to any given problem when we're dealing with a complex system. It's proven by mathematics and physics. So I think that's why it's so important to sort of, embrace more complex topics like that and understand things like that. So we actually have frameworks to understand that there's more than one way to do everything in fitness, and hopefully steer us away from that dogma. But like you said, like, that dogma and turning fitness into religion, so attractive.
Yeah, it is. Now, I mean, this is going to be kind of a big picture question. I'm sure we can just flow off of a few of these topics as you name them. What are a few of the trends in the fitness industry and training right now? What are some things that need to die? Just some very common trends or beliefs in training in the fitness industry that are very common out there that you would strongly disagree with.
I'm trying to go on a run here. Okay. Science based. What the fuck is that? Where I come from, it's evidence based. So please, for the love of God, stop saying science based because I don't know, it's just a weird way of saying it. And they're the least scientifically minded crowd I've ever run into in my life. I mean, I was saying this about the evidence based crowd, but the science based crowd is a caricature even of this. Like, when you put evidence-based or science-based in your Instagram bio, it doesn't mean that you read research. That's what you're trying to indicate to the rest of people. All it means is you follow Mike Israetel and Lane Norton on Instagram and you just parrot whatever they think. And like, again, like I don't fault people. I think that they're outstanding individuals, but I just think we need to be a little bit more honest about that whole crowd. And then like in the hypertrophy space, like it's just going to war. Like it's just two opposing religions. You've got high volume versus low volume. You've got the main gainers versus the cutters and bulkers. I think there's some necessary conversation sort of taking place there, but it just seems like the two sides are having such low faith discussions and low faith interactions with each other that it's going to be a painful process working that out.
Let's get into a couple of those real quick. First of all, what would your distinction be between science-based and evidence-based?
Science-based is you are chronically online and don't read research. Evidence-based, there's a chance you might actually read research and understand the hierarchy of evidence. But probably if you say both of those a lot, again, it's probably a lot of more just virtue signaling than anything. Like, it's because again, it's like you shouldn't have to say that you're evidence-based. Kind of goes without saying.
I couldn't.
Should be using like astrology, like.
No, I couldn't.
Because again, it frustrates me because the bros are like, I use experience. It's like, yeah, that's in the evidence base. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? And again, it's like these studies are the observed experiences of more than just one person. So, yeah, it's great. But then again, then you get the evidence-based glazers who don't like it when the way studies are conducted, like the methodology is questioned. I think that's the other thing where it's like, I had my heart broken by sports science a little bit just when you do read some of the studies, you're like, oh man, this is tough. There's some really bad studies.
Yeah, there is some literature out there and some research studies that have been conducted that you look at the mechanisms of the study or the the limited subjects that the study was looking at. And there are
the question, like, stop asking squats versus hip thrusts. Stop it. No more. We just how much did Jeff Nippard? No, who was it? It was Brett Contreras and Menno funded another squats versus hip thrust studies. I'm like, fucking why? What? Again, it's not helping anyone figure out whether they should program one of those exercises. It's fucking obvious. Do you want to grow your quads or not? Do you want to emphasize the stretch or do you want to emphasize the shortened position? Most people probably doing a bit of both. Like, it was fucking horrible question to ask us. Like, again, science is not going to give us the, what exercise do I give to my client for glutes? Just fucking, sorry, I get triggered on that one.
No, feel free to get triggered, please.
Just because you know why? Because it's like, if all the people with evidence-based in their bio, like if they're going to read one study a year, it'll be a squats versus hip thrust study. And they're always those bullshit studies because there was the Menno and, keep forgetting his fucking name. There was the Menno and Brett one, but before that, there was the Barbalo study. Remember, it was it can't have been 2012. It had to be 2016. I'm pretty sure. And it was one that Greg Knuckles looked into because people were really excited about it because it was a squats versus hip thrust study, not just on trained subjects, on bikini competitors. But they fudged all the numbers. So when you looked into the results of the study, like all these supposedly trained bikini competitors added like 30% to their squat 1RMs in like 6 weeks and things like that. And Greg was like, I don't know about these results. He probed a little bit further, issued a white paper. Turns out Barbalo, they're just like a publishing factory. He was putting so much pressure on his scientists to crunch the numbers that they just made them up.
Yeah, and even just the fixation on something like, squat versus hip thrust type thing, it kind of just perpetuates this idea of, the optimal exercise. Like, I need to find this like one perfect exercise. It's like,
Where if they're like, do they do a good job of growing your glutes? That's a useful question. I do want to know like what works and what doesn't work. But as far as there's like little tiny differences between the two exercises that are going to be overwhelmed by preferences and motivation and logistics, it's crazy.
right. I mean, unless you are a power lifter where within competition, you need to be specifically good at back squatting. At the end of the day, all these things are just general tools to either elicit a hypertrophy response or to get generally stronger. And there's a number of different tools and exercises that you could potentially use to achieve the task. So if you're just constantly getting lost in the weeds of searching for the one perfect exercise to do it, you're just missing the big picture.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing you mentioned was kind of the hypertrophy wars going on as far as the low volume. You've got the Paul Carter lift run bang out there who's all in on the low volume high intensity approach. And then of course you've got your more old school bodybuilders who are all about lots of volume, 4 sets of 12 and drop sets and intensifiers in all these things. Do you I'm assuming you fall somewhere in the middle or in they both they can both be utilized camp?
Everyone can tell looking at me like I'm not a pure bodybuilder. Like as a strength and conditioning coach or someone who is always programming multiple qualities for people concurrently, I'm sort of forced into the low volume, higher intensity thing because just like logistically, that's what works in my programming style.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% made up in my mind. Or I think based on the evidence, I do lean towards you can keep adding additional sets and you will likely see more hypertrophy, assuming you can recover. But then so I think the whole 50 sets meme, it's like, that's nonsense. But 2 sets, I think a lot of people, I think if you can only recover from a couple of hard sets, and I'm sure that I don't doubt that there's a bunch of people in this situation, but I would wonder like what your overall health is like. And if you should maybe consider just making some lifestyle changes, and then you might notice all of a sudden you can tank a bit more volume productively. But yeah, I've benefited from the discussion because I'm like, oh, right, like 2 hard sets, close proximity to failure, that could get the job done when I have so many other qualities to focus on for me and my clients. So I've enjoyed that aspect of the low volume debate. And that, like I said, practically that's where I stand, but philosophically, and if I was doing a pure hypertrophy approach, I would definitely add more volume. But again, only quality, and I would try to maintain a relatively high proximity to failure, more just due to preference. I don't want to have to do a ridiculous amount of sets and like be like, ooh, 7 RPE on bicep, felt like put a bullet in my head.
Yeah, well, I mean, a point that you touched on there was, depending on the big picture of the goal and who you're training, you can utilize different approaches in different settings. Like, in a team sports setting where we need the guys, it's not just hypertrophy, obviously, we need the guys to get faster and more explosive. We need to, do single leg training, changing direction, plyometrics, all these things. Being able to take a low volume approach with, their hypertrophy based accessory work, it's a very useful tool because it's time saving, and then the athletes are going to have a lower tendency to get bored. It's 2 hard working sets. We're going heavy on it. There's a competitive component to it. So again, these are just some of the intangibles about coaching and programming. It's thinking about the big picture logistics or equipment access or time constraints, the mindset of the particular type of athlete you're working with. So and the next point you touched on was the bulking versus main gaining, and of course that's another big topic going on right now, and that's one I've chimed in on myself as of late.
Where are you at?
A lot of my coaching that I do is nutrition coaching, so I'm a little bit in the middle. I'm not you've got the two spectrums, right? You've got the just bulk, get huge, pushing a huge calorie surplus. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum, which is like use like pure maintenance calories, and you'll be able to still elicit a little bit of tissue growth. And just as you gain tissue, slowly bring up your maintenance calories and stay super lean while you're doing it. I'm somewhere in the middle. Yeah,
I think like practically that everyone's been saying the same shit for years. Like I haven't seen dreamer bulking really encouraged on anyone other than like really underweight high school kids in years. I'm pretty sure everyone's been into, like, weight needs to be going up, but there's no point going silly with it. I do think the recent discussion around like fat cell hypertrophy is quite interesting as well. But like I said, it sort of seemed like people were sort of already trending that way, and then people have gotten super finger wavy about it and just be like, no, we need to eat at maintenance, otherwise you're just growing fat cells. And it's like, yeah, but like practically it's a tiny surplus. Like they won't say it, but like again, practically you got to err on the side of caution due to tiny surplus.
Yeah, I think really the big push with the lean gaining, the main gaining, it's really not helpful for the vast majority of anyone who's trying to put on size, because most people are not professional bodybuilders whose entire living is based upon the meals that they're eating and pristine calorie tracking. So for the average person who's trying to gain size and put on some muscle, putting it in their head that if you want to do this correctly and not get fat, you have to have your calories perfectly dialed in to basically maintenance, and it's super calculated. And
you're so much research on how shit we are at tracking as well. Like, I think that's why I worry about the whole, like, just trying to eat at maintenance. I'm like, no, just practically. I feel like you always, even small surplus with people's tracking errors could be a deficit so often.
Yeah, for sure. So like if I'm working with someone who just wants to get bigger, I like to just kind of go off of body response. And I have them do a food journal and get a sense of, okay, what are you currently eating? Let's get a rough snapshot of what are kind of the calories that are maintaining your body weight. Most people are pretty much maintaining it in their average day-to-day life. It's then, okay, let's start with adding about 500 calories to what you're currently doing. Let's give that a week. And if your body weight goes up a pound or two, great. We're probably right in the ballpark. And as we go and you continue to add weight, I'm looking at photos, and if you're starting to accrue a little bit of body fat, or your appetite is really suffering, okay, we start introducing some lower calorie days, or maybe we scale the calories back a bit at that point. Or conversely, if we put the extra calories in and you're just totally plateaued for a few weeks, well, let's add another 500 calories in, and just go off of general body response. And you just don't let yourself get too fat as you go, and you can adjust. Like, you're not locked into, once you write your diet plan, you can change it as you go. You can scale your calories back or increase them a little bit. Like, you're not going to overnight gain 30 pounds of body fat. It's going to happen slowly, and you can just evaluate and respond as you go. So that's usually kind of my approach with it.
Yeah, that's it. I think bulk, it's not as bad as it's been made out recently.
Guys, thank you for tuning in and supporting the podcast. I just wanted to take a minute to give a shout out over to my guys at Troponin Supplements. So they're the sponsor of the podcast, and in my opinion, they carry the best supplements on the market, and it's not even close. And they're the one company that I've wanted to align myself with. As a nutrition coach working with NFL football players, other professional athletes, strongman competitors, bodybuilders, powerlifters, fitness enthusiasts, endurance athletes, I have to be very particular about any supplement company I endorse. And with Troponin Supplements, frankly, it was a no-brainer. These are the products I've been using myself for the last few years, before I ever became involved with the company. I know the owner personally, Justin Harris. He is one of the brilliant minds in the bodybuilding industry, and we've talked, and all he has wanted to do is just bring some of the elite top-of-the-line products to the market, and that's what he's done. So these are the products I recommend and endorse to all my athletes, all my clients. I use myself, and I want to pass this along to you guys as well. So I'm going to highlight a couple products here. First and foremost, we've got the ATP. This is a high dose of caffeine paired with a very powerful nootropic. I take this before work. I take this before I podcast. This is going to give you a great boost in mood, in focus, memory enhancement. You're just gonna feel like you took the Limitless pill when you use ATP. It's an effervescent tablet. You drop it in your water, it dissolves, tastes great. The next product, Field Rations. This is the premier intra-workout supplement on the market right now. It's a one-stop shop for all your intra-workout needs. It's based in highly branched cyclic dextrin, contains essential amino acids, electrolytes, tastes amazing. I use this within every training session. Then we've got the Suppressor Max. This is awesome for controlling your blood sugar. It's got a high dose of berberine, but then has complementary ingredients that are going to keep the berberine bioavailable and stay in your system longer. This is the best blood sugar product on the market. If you're bulking, if you're eating a ton of food, if you're using a cheat meal, this is a great product for you. And then finally, I love this one. I've always had sleep issues. Hit the Rack. This is one of the best sleep products I've ever tried. I use it about 30 minutes before bed most nights, and this has been the one supplement that has actually helped me fall asleep and stay asleep. And then of course, we got the Troponin T logo bodybuilding jersey and the hat. We've got great apparel on the site. So guys, check out Troponin supplements. You can find the link in the show notes, in the bio, or you can simply just Google Troponin supplements. Use code HECK, capital HECK, at checkout for a discount. Check them out, guys. These are some of the best products on the market. Yeah. So now I've got a list. You made a post somewhat recently, 10 training trends that need to die. I'll read some of them off of right here. Now this one we're kind of already gone into, worrying about optimal exercise selection, exercise tier list. Number 2, skipping the gym because your whoop strap told you to. That's a good one.
I hate whoop straps. I think they promote a lack of self-awareness. Well, I don't, so, because like, there are people that'll bring this up whenever I shit on whoop straps. There are people like, so I don't want to make a joke out of it's like, this is off. Sometimes people who suffered abuse and stuff like that, I think like are so checked out of their bodies as like a survival mechanism that they struggle with that. And I want to make space for those people. And if they need a whoop strap to tell them how they're feeling that day, then by all means, fucking use whatever you need at that point. But there's so many people that I think have the self-awareness that we've been told to not trust our bodies, or that you need a little device to tell you how you slept. And also, I don't call it a whoop strap. I just call it a nocebo strap, because I just know so many people that, felt like I slept amazing. And it's like, then the strap tells like, nah, slept like shit. You're under recovered. Training's going to be unproductive. It's like, that's just fucking nonsense. And because it's just using HRV as a proxy, which proxies are, they're proxies. It's just compare that to fucking just waiting to see how your day pans out. Roll into the gym if it suits your schedule. Start warming up, then see how you feel. That compared to a whoop strap breeding is just like fucking night and day. And like I said, people have been told, fucking use data-driven approach. Facts don't care about your feelings. It's like, no, and that's not really it. Like, it's like, just how do you fucking feel? How do you feel? Sit there, think, close your eyes if you have to. So yeah, because there's a lot of tactics that I use to promote self-awareness in my coaching. RPE, auto-regulation, is another one of them. Again, a lot of people are like, no, it's subjective. Like, I need an objective rating. It's like, no, you fucking don't. How did it feel compared to other weights you've lifted? You can do this. I believe in you. I believe in our ability to know ourselves, you know?
Absolutely. And coming from the strength and conditioning world, where sports science has become a bigger and bigger thing in sports performance, one of my complaints with sports science is how far the pendulum has swung to where every decision that's being made from a training standpoint is based on
data points to support.
It's based on the data. Yeah. So, these like pre-workout readiness data, like before the athlete does anything, they got to jump on the force plate or, and based on
about readiness test the other day. It's factory installed in the training process. It's called a fucking warm-up set. Like, I can't imagine, like, how does it happen? The lack of readiness impacting the workout, because wouldn't you just be warming up and the athlete's like, coach, I feel like shit. You're like, sweet. Readiness test. Athlete comes in the gym. How you doing today? Readiness test. How did that set feel? Readiness test. Fuck your force plates. Fuck your grip test. I'll take a survey. If the coach has a complete lack of social skills and you're incapable of asking your athlete how they're doing, you should probably find a new career if that's the case, but I will settle for a fucking survey. But yeah, it's just like, readiness tests are fucking crazy. Because again, why would you use a proxy when you can use the actual fucking thing that you're trying to measure? Like, fucking
100%. So, my take on this, and I don't want to talk shit on sports science as a whole, because I know a lot of very brilliant practitioners in the world of sports science. I had the opportunity to work with some sports scientists that I very much respect and learned a lot from. But I think there's also this component of they want to provide value, and they feel like if my data can predict injuries, if my data just carries this immense value towards our decision making, like, there's some sports scientists who want to create this environment where we need the data, right? We need this data very much. And then it becomes like fear mongering with the athletes. I was a part of a program where, athletes would go through a myriad of testing weekly, where they would do force plates, they would do Nordboard, they would do 1080 sprint. And then we would, at the end of the week, have this big flag list of anyone who had shown an asymmetry or some drop off on their force plate or the Nordboard. The athlete was flagged. And then we were calling them saying, hey, you were, flagged on your Nordboard test. We need you to come in. And chances are the athlete was like, whatever, they didn't try as hard on the Nordboard that day, or whatever. They were feeling a little bit sore from practice. So, maybe they had a little bit of inhibition in their right side or something. But now the athlete's thinking like, oh shit, like, I've been flagged. Like, there's the injury prediction system.
like seed. Yeah.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden the athletes, they've got that seed planted in their brain, and now they're second guessing themselves. They're worried about it, as opposed to, like you said, just be a coach. Like, have a good coach's eye. Like, if you notice a guy's dragging ass, or a guy's kind of regressing in training, or your athlete is coming up to you saying like, hey coach, I don't have it today, I feel like shit, like, go, the subjective feedback you get from the athletes or clients, and your coach's eye will go so much further than just the data.
Because that's it. There are coaches who will have that conversation, and they'll be like, now squeeze this to let me test for the readiness.
Yeah, the grip dynamometers.
I think I'm not picking up on here. Need a more objective test.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's just like, just people want to be cutting edge. They want to provide value.
There is to be a guru. And I feel like there's a lot of coaches that are mourning that, as we start to understand that what we do works best when it's like really collaborative. Whereas I feel like the old worldview was coach is the genius. They know exactly what the athlete needs. Athlete's stupid. Just do what the coach says. Whereas now everything we're learning about humans and how we respond to stresses and adapt, it sort of is that, again, like, much more collaborative. It's almost like the hero's journey sort of thing. And I just think a lot of coaches, well, some haven't acknowledged it, some have, and they're still just wrestling and struggling to process it seems.
Yeah, and there's so many stressors outside of the gym and training and sports that go into it. Sometimes you might just need to have a conversation with your athlete or your client, say, what's going on in your life? Like, hey, maybe this guy just went through a bad breakup, and that's a big source of stress that is now manifesting in their performance or their training, or maybe just something, they've got an exam that they're worried about, they're stressed about, or for whatever reason they're not sleeping. So sometimes just like having a conversation with the athletes and the clients goes a lot further than what the numbers say.
Yeah. Or even like acknowledging where you are in the hierarchy. This is something that James Smith, the thinker, pointed out in pro sport. And I read it as a personal trainer. I was like, oh my God, this pro sport thing structure applies exactly to what I do. Because he was talking about like strength and conditioning coaches. You're at highest, like I think he said third in the hierarchy of dosing load or stress to the athlete. He's sort of talking about sometimes as a conditioning coach, you write the perfect conditioning protocol, and then someone's chatting shit to the coach at practice and he makes them run laps. And it's just like, you need to acknowledge where you are in the hierarchy so you can be your most effective. And as a personal trainer, I sort of started to reflect on it, because again, I think how we get results, it's the controlled application of stress to a system intending to drive certain outcomes. But as a personal trainer, I'm at most third highest in the hierarchy of dosing stress to my client. There's their boss, there's their family, like their partner and their kids and things like that. And all of them are much more in control of the stress affecting that system than I am. So that's why I have to be reactive. I have to be flexible so I can work in amongst my two bosses and then try to get my subject over the leg. Like, you know, they don't care when their squat testing day is. They'll drop the craziest fucking assignment on their desk right before their lunchtime personal training session and just rattle them going into it. I'm like, fuck, what? Just, yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many parallels between like pro sport, gen pop. And again, it goes back to just when you acknowledge the human element of it, you really sort of see it for what it is.
Yeah, just seeing the big picture, the whole human experience, everything that goes into it. Everyone wants to look at training and sports in its own vacuum. You got to step back and take in the big picture. All right, next thing on your list was thinking a bit of cardio will kill your gains. That's a big one.
It's a personal one as well, because I talked about how I was a hard gainer and like, especially when I was full-time doing Olympic weightlifting, like I used to not go on walks with my girlfriend on the weekend because I was like, nah, there are too many calories and things like that, which is like so shit on real levels. And like I said, very much like a me thing, but man, it was an industry thing as well. Like so many people were proud of not giving their clients cardio. It's sort of seen as that, like, it's that rebellion of strength training, right? So no, everyone thinks cardio is the healthy thing. It's actually like lifting heavy is really healthy. Turns out all exercise is really healthy. And combining it is even more healthy. And it's like, yeah, just eat a bit fucking more. It's not like you completely shut down the signaling process for hypertrophy as soon as you get your heart rate up too high. Well, like I said, your heart rate's going to get up on a set of 8 squats or going up the stairs. And like, I don't know if it should be getting that high. Set of 8 on squats due to conditioning and your cardio system instead of muscular failure.
Right. One of my mentors, Justin Harris, who is he's a bodybuilding coach, and I learned a lot from him about nutrition in my early years. He made the point. He was like, imagine trying to explain to like your grandma, someone who doesn't know much about this stuff. Imagine explaining to your grandma, like, oh, I can't walk on the treadmill. Extra exercise is it's gonna kill my gains. Right. Like when you start talking about it in those simple terms, like it doesn't make sense. Like having a good aerobic base and just a baseline level of conditioning, it's only gonna augment your ability to put on muscle.
It's total help for the system, because I'm sure you've experienced this as well. And this is why I think a lot of people who are just training for one thing, who talk about the low volume approach being the only way, I question their total health, because again, I think so many people are way less healthy than they make out just because they're a fitness person. Like a lot of strength athletes and bodybuilders essentially live an obese lifestyle when they're not in the fucking gym.
Yeah. I mean,
whereas I look at CrossFitters, and a lot of them, I think they just have a bit more of a resilient system. And I think people are like, how can they do all that? And I'm like, I think they just worked towards it. And some of them are freaks, whatever. But yeah, I think there's something to be said about the total health, robustness, and resilience to the system. Sometimes you can increase that threshold and it can just take on more productively.
Yeah, and just going back to training philosophy, I think you and I agree on this. Like one of my just biggest overarching themes when it comes to training is just creating a holistically well-rounded athlete. Like leaving no stone unturned. Like let's address hypertrophy. Let's address both bilateral and unilateral training. Your ability, even if you're not a field athlete, your ability to run and change directions and jump, and just being able to be competent executing basic movements, being able to move in more planes than just the sagittal plane. Just all of these things, being a more well-rounded, more just head to toe developed human is going to go a long way with helping you with whatever you're specifically trying to get better at.
100%. It's definitely the GPP philosophy.
Yeah. So, and this segues nicely into your next point, which was thinking that plyometrics are only for quote unquote athletes. Now you talk a good bit on plyometrics within the content that you put out there. I think it's a lot of good stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, I love it, man. It's something that I always was curious about and wanted to implement more in my training and with my clients as well, but I lacked the system and the tools to do it. Shout out to Matt Watson. I feel like this is a common pain point for a lot of performance-minded coaches. There's not a lot of shared or consistent use of language when it comes to different plyometric variations. So especially with his locomotive plyo series. I'm really grateful for Matt Watson. If you're listening and you don't follow him, I think he's a legend of the game. He just has this very clear system that he's sort of trying to push for plyometrics, like leaping, hopping, bounding. He's got his tiers, light, medium, ping tier, and then there's a deep tier as well, which is like some ballistic, like deeper, more yielding jumps. And just like having those two systems to sort of cross over each other, you just get so much variation, regression and progression, intensity control. And I think that, like I was saying at the start, whether it's strength, whether it's a little bit of cardio, building up your endurance, getting a little bit more flexible, moving a little bit faster like you do with plyometrics, there is health benefits to every different form of training, especially when the dose is appropriate. I mean, like recreational running is probably the most popular sport in the world. And so many of those people have a personal trainer. And I think a lot of them, it's a big pill to swallow. It's like, hey, you know, like if we did some strength training, some heavy squats and lunges and some hinges and stuff, like that could do so much for making you a more resilient runner. Man, if you want to put the spring in someone's fucking step, get them into some like good locomotive plyo training. And you get these people who, you know how you can survive running, and you see those people, they're just fucking battlers. Like they're real David Goggins. Like, I'm just going to survive this. Right? It looks like shit from the start, but credit to them, they just keep going. Versus those people where they run, you're like, man, this is kind of sexy. And some of those people are just freaks. They naturally have it. You can develop that quality with plyometrics. I think a lot of people give up on it as well because it takes a little bit longer to see the changes in plyometric training. Yeah, I think with strength training, one of the things that's so awesome about it is you get this like linear progression, noob gains. You don't necessarily get so much of that feeling when you get into plyometric training. You kind of feel like you're not necessarily getting more and more coordinated every single week. It's sort of like after a month or two, you're like, hey, am I a bit less shit at this? But it's really like, it takes like 6 months to remodel a fucking tendon. And there's more to it than that, right? You know, I think a lot of the time we think plyometrics, we just think tendons. It's coordinating the whole muscle tendon unit. It's removing inhibition from the system. So many of us are so inhibited. That's what Matt Watson drew my attention to. Like you fly through the air and you feel your whole system shut down. Whereas then over time, when you pursue this plyometric training, you can start hurtling through the air. And then all of a sudden you notice your body's not saying no, but actually saying yes to the momentum and building on it each stride. All of a sudden, attacking the ground is your friend. Your body yearns for it. And I just think there's so many amazing things that come out of it. I mean, even like, man, just how resilient my fucking knees feel. Like bouncing out of squats, it's nothing. No, and that's like one of my favorite aspects of weightlifting, like a good bounce with the knees forward. Man, when you've been bouncing off one leg or doing hard, deep tier plyos and stuff, like I said, your body will just scream for more. I think there's a lot of people listening when they think of those things like bouncing in a squat, they almost sort of reflexively feel their knees react to that. And so, yeah, if those things sound good to you, get into some plyos and go follow Matt Watson as well.
I don't understand. You said your knees feel better. You didn't mention anything about tibialis raises or nerve toe split squats.
Smashing my tips, and that's it. Like it will light your tips up. If you want to feel the function of a tib, that's fucking
Well, and then I think a lot of people also, they just associate plyometrics with like, oh, jumping higher. And I mean, you posted on this the other day, which the real benefit of plyometrics, it's not really the concentric necessarily. It's not so much the takeoff. It's the landing, right? And teaching, training your tissue to absorb and decelerate forces. So, you were just talking about it, reacting off the ground, interacting with the ground, and then, just building tissue resiliency, building joint resiliency, and that can apply to nearly everyone who's trying to improve their performance at any capacity. Just utilizing some plyometrics, even if you're kind of just microdosing them, just training your body to absorb and decelerate force. It's going to be a very helpful quality for a lot of things.
It also, like, ironically, getting more into plyometrics and exploring that gave me more confirmation of how good strength training is for athleticism. Because like you notice this discrepancy when you're dealing with people who are really good at strength training, when they haven't had a long history of plyometric training and you introduce them to it, they actually get so far off the ground, especially when they're on two legs. Like you get them doing leaping, they're going almost as high as some of your well-trained, more athletic, plyometrically trained people. But it's then when they come back down, what they do in the air to try to set up that next interaction with the ground is where it all goes to shit. So, my friend Jack Edwards, he loves the Avatar archetypes, talks about earthbenders, firebenders, waterbenders, airbenders for his sort of sprinting archetypes. And strength training does make you a phenomenal earthbender. You're so good at pushing into the ground. But then plyometric training, it'll teach you how to be an airbender as well, because all those really strong people, they have no fucking clue what to do in the air. They have no idea how to set up a good ground strike that helps them harness momentum in an efficient way. They just abuse their body with that. Sorry, the ground hits them. They don't hit the ground.
Yeah, that's a good way.
Becoming an airbender, knowing how to coil yourself in the air and strike at the ground, it just, like I said, earthbending, airbending, two sides of the same coin, and they're so complementary.
I mean, when you even look at something like running and sprinting, I mean, it's essentially a plyometric. I mean, you're jumping basically from foot to foot, and your ability to absorb, interact with the ground, and attack the ground.
But then also in early acceleration, we are on the ground 80% of the time. And then you invert that for max velocity. So like I said, like that whole, like, people are like, oh, it's plies, you got to train like a real athlete. And then this whole like meathead crowd. It's like when you bring that together, it's like, that's the solution.
Yeah, you know, when I was working in the NFL and we were doing a lot of analytics with the sports science stuff and the force plates, and I know we were kind of just criticizing some of that stuff, but one of the things that we found, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but one of the things we saw that was common among our twitchiest and most explosive athletes, it wasn't necessarily how high they jump, but when they would dip and load for their jump, those who the time between the eccentric to the concentric, that little in between period, those who had the smallest, the shortest, quickest time between the dip and the drive, those were the really explosive guys, or the guys who spend the least amount of time on the ground when they're sprinting. Those are the really fast.
There's some guys, and some of them do get off the ground, but then when they're winding up, you have time to sort of check your watch.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we see the big white linebacker, he's taking forever to get down and up. No, he gets a pretty high vertical, but he's just not very twitchy when it comes to change of direction or you know, going from 0 to 100. Okay, what was the next thing you had on your list? So one magic exercise to fix your back pain. So back pain, that's a hot button topic for sure, with a lot of fear mongering around it in general. Now, do you, I think you follow Q Wiley on Instagram, physio, he worked at UNC. Anyway, regardless.
Again? Oh, is that Coach Q physio?
Coach Q. Yeah.
Yes. Because if I haven't met him at IRL, or I haven't said, yes, legend of the game.
Yeah. So actually, I was just hanging out with him earlier today. He's a good friend of mine. And, you know, we were just talking about
Jackson.
He is. He's a freak. But we were just talking about some of the, you know, the fear mongering around back pain, and you know, talking about like Stuart McGill, who Stuart McGill he's put out a lot of good stuff, but
don't punch some wheels into your wife. Fucking.
Yeah, you know, in some ways it's kind of created this fear mongering of, oh, I need to keep this perfectly neutral spine with whatever do, and if I flex my spine at all, I'm gonna get hurt. You know, is that something you see a lot of out there? Just fear of flexing at the spine?
So Australia, our physio board is pretty ahead of the ball. It's not universally adopted. Like you still get a lot of the McGill stuff, but our physio sector in Australia is actually incredibly progressive, really on board with a lot of like the Peter O'Sullivan recommendations and things like that. So Australian physio as a whole is heading in the right direction, but personal trainers are just lagging behind, and there's still a lot of like really outdated physios there that like trying to give someone a special exercise or just giving people some really awkward and unhelpful beliefs about the spine and maybe how they're responsible for their pain. That's a big McGillism as well. Like, I think that's the big thing. Like, people are just living with their head in the sand when it comes to the realities of back pain. Back pain is part of the human experience. I think that there's a lot of really good evidence for that, and that sucks. But then the other side, but then once you acknowledge that, and then you stop freaking out every time you experience some back pain and things like that, you change your perception, you change your attitude to it, you change the way you have conversations about it. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh right, it's like because it's different, right? You might feel pain here, and you're like meh. But then all of a sudden, if that's in your lower back, like we have a different attitude towards that. And I understand why as well, because like the back, it affects other parts of your body so much more. If you just got a bit of pain here, it's just like, well, yeah, you're not aggravating necessarily every time you move. So like the back, one of the reasons is like, you can almost feel it in everything. But then there is that, even compared to like a knee or something like that, there is just this real freak out whenever you've sort of hurt your back end. So much more vigilance. And I just don't know if it's serving anyone. And then, so then the other side, sorry, I'll land this plane in a second. When you look at the natural history of back pain, it's so good. Just so much of it resolves itself if you don't train like a cunt.
Yeah, it kind of comes down to those two magic words, load management, which oftentimes that is what it comes down to with everything training and rehabs, load management, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And some people, and this is the other thing, people are like, no, but I tried to do smart load management and I still got hurt. I'm like, well, yeah, that's the thing. We're not fully in control of all the loads that are affecting our system at any given point. We're just trying our best. And it's like, even when you fail at load management, the solution is still load management.
Yeah, and another thing with back pain, I think people sometimes are also too quick to get imaging done. They go and get an MRI, and like anyone, even if your back doesn't hurt, you go and get an MRI of your spine, they're going to find something wrong. Like there's going to be some level of degradation or, slightly bulging disc, something. And you're going to see that on the radiology report. And then that, again, it plants that seed in your brain. Like, oh my God, I've got something wrong with my back, right?
I had an incident recently. It was actually with my shoulder, and again, it was a real test of my belief system. I scorpioned it into a sandbar while I was surfing. I'd already messed up the shoulder a little bit just from benching too much, and like I knew I was like, I'm just gonna keep adding more bench till my shoulder feels bad, and then I'll sort of reduce it once my shoulder flares up. Anyway, in the middle of one of those flare ups, then I just rammed it into a sandbar while surfing, and I came up and I was like, oh my God, like, I'm scared to move this. Like, when you're making noises, you're like, fuck. So like, I was so glad. I was like, I think I might need to take myself to hospital. But then I was like, wait, what are they going to do? And there was the imaging thing. I was like, do I want to scan of this shoulder? Like I've had good feeling shoulders my whole life, but there could be some shit in there that they're going to find that's then going to plant some seed in my head. And I was just like, right, what can they actually do for me other than immobilize this thing? I was like, I'm just going to go with it. Just go write it out myself. And it did sort of get to that point where I was a month in and I hadn't seen the amount of improvement that I wanted. And I was like, maybe I am going to go see someone just to get a second opinion and some confidence. And I think that's the exact reason why you should go to a professional when you've sort of lost that faith in yourself or you're a little bit uncertain about the situation. Anyway, I just brooded my way through it and it got better in the end. Again, just load management, try to do what you can. And it was fuck. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I mean that's often the best way to do it. It's like, hey, you've got something that hurts. All right, find a way to work around it. Find an angle or an exercise variation that doesn't hurt it. So do what you can to work around it until the thing starts feeling better. And I did the same thing.
I came in from the surf. I ate a meal and I just got myself into the gym and I was like, all right, there's not going to be much I can do with this. I probably should have let it settle for a little bit more in hindsight, but I was like, all right, day one, let's rebuild back. And now I'm back setting bench PBs. Terrible bench PBs, but bench PBs nonetheless.
Bench PBs nonetheless is all that matters, man. All right, let me see what else.
I'll be a shit bencher by the end of the year.
What's the current best?
110 kilos, which I know it's bad. I just wanted to tell everyone, I spent a long time not training my upper body because I believed it would ruin my overhead position for weightlifting. I mean, no excuses, whatever. It just sucks. But yeah, I lost 5 years.
Well, speaking of the bench press, and I have spoken on this, somewhat recently. I think the over fixation on the flat barbell bench press is one of my annoying fitness trends, because you look at any strength and conditioning program, and what is the priority press exercise always is going to be bench press. And I'm not trying to demonize the bench press. I love bench pressing, but
So it's very technical, but like
it is. And if of all the press options out there, it's one that oftentimes you'll see a lot of pec tweaks or bicep tendonitis, shoulder issues, things like that. So, when I was in strength and conditioning, I was always saying like, hey, what if we just get away from flat bench pressing? What if that's not our priority press? Like, what if we do overhead pressing? What if we do a standing strict press? What if we do push press instead of dynamic effort bench press? What if we just do focus on incline benching? And it's like, I've never seen a strength and conditioning program that didn't prioritize flat bench pressing. And it just comes down to this is just what we've always done. Everyone starts off bench pressing. Everyone falls in love with bench press at an early age. And then it becomes,
and that's the thing as well. Do you think it's just so hard to get a bunch of high test competitive men in a room and have an intelligent bench session? Just, it does. Like if there's one exercise where people are like, all right, let's absolutely go for it. It is flat barbell bench. Like people just cannot help themselves. Hey.
yeah, unfortunately, the most weight room injuries I've ever seen, I can clearly associate them with flat bench pressing. The biggest ego lift. I mean, it's like, as far as exercises go, relatively dangerous one. I mean, the possibilities of dropping the bar on your throat, you need an attentive spotter. The amount of things that can go wrong with a bench press.
We've had a couple of deaths in Australia from bench pressing. Some tragic deaths that are straight out of horror films. One guy, barbell slip, he was doing suicide grips, just slipped out, bounced off air chest. 24 hours later, had a heart attack. Another guy, those like Final Destination movies where it's like there's a screw loose and then someone just dies. So there was a kid bench pressing at the local PCYC. There was no one else in the building and he died. He failed a bench press. It was on his neck. They looked on the CCTV footage. He was struggling for an hour and a half. No one else there to help. It was like, it's like,
yeah,
bench press. It'll get you.
That's a nightmare.
No clips if you're benching solo. No clips.
Yeah, no, for sure. That way you can dump.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that kind of leads me into another topic, which is just some of and we've touched on a little bit, but some of the over sensationalism of sports specificity when it comes to strength and conditioning in sports. This is an annoying one for sure. Just, I've had a lot of clients come to me and some of them are interested in kind of athletic type training. And they're like, I want you to, give me a real sports specific weight room program. And I'm like, well, and they're expecting all this cutting edge guru, like super sports, getting into perfect, athletic positions, mirroring what they're going to do on the field. And I'm like, okay, well, I want to set some expectations. This isn't going to be drastically different than a lot of the training you've probably already been exposed to. We're going to try in the weight room, no matter what athlete you are, we're going to try to get you generally bigger, faster, stronger, more resilient. Right. But there's just this sensationalism of trying to like replicate the positions you get into in the field or the court in the weight room. It's like, oh, as you play this position and you get into this position on the field, so let's put a bar on your back and do that same thing, in the weight room. And I think that's bullshit.
It comes from, I think a large part of it comes from trying to do too much as an S&C coach. I think you're like, wow, I could 10x this guy's athleticism. So therefore I need every single thing I do with that person to have maximum transfer. So you're looking like, all right, they run on the balls of the foot. So I'm not going to let them squat with their heels on the ground, get the most. But again, as soon as you realize the small amount of transfer we can get from even the best and most intelligent S&C plan, then you're like, wait, I need to make sure that I'm doing as good of a job as possible of just pure strength training, bodybuilding, plyometric training, and just build up those general qualities, and that the athlete will understand how to harness them just through relentlessly pursuing being a PhD in their sport. And that a lot of the time, when you try to make these general qualities more specific to the sport, you actually just water down the amount of adaptation that you can get. So you have terrible strength training, terrible plyometric training, terrible speed training. What was the other one? Terrible hypertrophy training. And then you get no transfer at all because, again, any gains you got was just from doing your actual sport.
Yeah, I think the one area we can get somewhat, sports specific within training is conditioning. Just attacking, the specific energy systems that you're going to be utilizing in your sport. If you're a football player and you're an American football player and a single play lasts about 4 seconds and you're going to get,
Just kind of easy to do the game, give you a concussion.
yeah, that's going to be different than the way you train a cross country runner or even, a soccer player who's kind of running back and forth, for the whole game. But when it comes to the weight room, like, we are general physical preparation coaches. We're just trying to augment the general traits that are going to transfer over and allow you to be better at honing your sport specific skills that you're doing with your sports coach. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. It's just like know your role, and that allows you to do your best job. And don't try to be anything more than that.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I think in the weight room, we can definitely help make guys more resilient, just with good tissue, exposing the tissue to load and exposing the tissue to absorbing and producing forces. But again, we don't need to simulate that with, sports specific exercise. It can be basic plyometrics and basic strength training. Like, you look at in American strength and conditioning, specifically football. You look at what strength and conditioning was in the 90s and early 2000s, and it was almost all machine based, doing muscle group work to failure. And now it's totally swung. You'll barely ever see a machine in a football weight room, and it's all a lot of Olympic lifting and more of this sports specific guruism type stuff. And then you look back at what they were doing back in the 90s and early 2000s, like, maybe they weren't so far off base with that. Like, hey, they're
Jordan stuff. I've only sort of seen it from The Last Dance, but I was like, oh wow, it was exactly what you said. Just on Atlantis machines, just run on the stack, getting a good pump, get a bit of obesity loss, and then move on. I was like, oh right, okay. Solid.
Yeah, I mean, with the machine-based stuff, like, you're exposing the tissue to load. You're getting
Sniper with it as well. Like, how sometimes, like, I don't mind loading someone's back, but how sometimes, like, you have an idea of where you want the load in the compound movement, but then the athlete's just not behaving. Whereas slap him in a machine, you just feel like a sniper. You just lighten up the exact tissue that you want. So easy.
Yeah.
Can be a bit boring.
And then when you're a strength and conditioning coach, like, you're working with, maybe 100 athletes, and, you get into more of the complex movements like the Olympic lifts. You're having to invest so much time teaching the technique, and it's valuable training time that you're not really getting a good training stimulus. You're having to teach it for weeks. And even then, a lot of these guys aren't going to necessarily be competent with some of these lifts. Whereas, hey, you put them in a machine, there's no learning curve. We can get right to training. So, and I'm not here advocating that athletes should just do machine-based training. I'm just saying that, a lot of coaches look at machine training or the way it's been done in the past as like, oh, that's archaic, it's old school. We need to be more sports specific and just, on BOSU balls with med balls. And, anyway, there's value in some of that machine stuff and old school training.
I've been having a love affair with the Smith machine recently, only because my only issue with machines is just like the floor space aspect of it. Whereas I think the Smith machine could be the sweet spot in the sense that it's basically 20 machines in one. You know what I mean? Like, it just does, it kind of does exactly what you want. But then some setups can be a pain in the ass with it.
I've always said if I was building a home gym, the first thing I would put in would be a Smith machine because it's so versatile. You can do so much with it. You can press it,
bands on it. You can even get a little bit athletic. Yeah,
a great versatile tool. But no, the Smith machine that's soft. That's for pussies.
I used to talk endless shit about it, and when they took it away from me, I was like, nah.
Right. All right, we got a couple more points here on your list, and then I'll let you get on to your day. What time did you say it was over there in Australia?
10:30 now. So this is priming me before I go. We've got second heavy front squat session for the week. and power cleans and second bench press session for the week. So
Okay. You said you were kind of locking in on your own training right now, huh?
yeah. I just let anything get in the way of it over the last year with travel and work and surfing and stuff like that. And I did say that I was going to prioritize surfing and traveling, but then I just I don't know, sometimes get called out and someone be like, "Oh, you fucking weak and skinny." I'd be like, "Fuck!" Like that stings a bit more than normal because I could be stronger. I could be a little bit quicker and meaner. So yeah, like, I was just fucking just listening to what people are saying. Be like, yeah, I should be training fucking harder. And you know, I'm 32. I just had this moment where I was like, I believe you can, yeah, keep it. I don't think I'm old by any stage yet. But then I was like, you know, if I really want to be, I'm like, I am in my prime. It's not over at any bit. Like if you know, if I want to make the most of it, you know, let's not fuck around. I'm in such a privileged position. I can make a schedule for training. So let's do it.
Couldn't agree more, man. And same here now. Now that I've stepped away from,
You're locked into shit.
well, I competed in strongman and powerlifting, all those things, and this is what I'm passionate about. My life falls apart when I don't have those things. Now I probably am not nearly as.
You know why I knew I needed to change? Because sometimes I'll be talking to some of my strong as fuck athletes, and I just tell them how I feel, and they'll be like, "Nah, man, you're plenty strong," and I just don't. I feel like they're lying to me. That's how I know I need to get my shit together. Or like, even like I'm single at the moment, but like halfway through last year, my girlfriend would be like, "Nah, you're heaps muscly." Just don't believe it. It's like I know what's up, you know what I mean? And that's when I realized it's like it's for you. You gotta have your own standard that you hold yourself to. And then it doesn't matter what other people are saying. You'd be like, yeah, hell yeah. All right.
Yeah, it's like when your girl tells you, "Oh, it's really big. It's really big."
Thank you. Thank
All right. Let's see what we got here. Scaring people about interior pelvic tilt. The old anterior pelvic tilt thing. You gotta fix it. You gotta get them out of the interior pelvic tilt at all costs, right?
People just make up such a big deal out of it. And I don't mind if we want to blame all the lower back pain and the tight hammies on anterior pelvic tilt, but then we also have to give it the credit for all the freak athletes with an anterior pelvic tilt, all those sub 10s that have been run with an anterior pelvic tilt. Do you follow David Gray?
Yeah, I do.
So David Gray was the first person I heard say this, who goes, think about all the most athletic people you know. How many have you seen who walk around with a posterior pelvic tilt, like their hips fully tucked under them? And like, there's a couple of big, strong people I know who have the tucked, but like most of the freaks, it's a bit of that more anterior pelvic tilt going on. And even for people who are like, people say like, in anterior pelvic tilt. And I've never run into that. Like you talk to people like, oh, he's stuck in anterior pelvic tilt. I lay them on their back. I'm like, all right, push your lower back into the ground. Lower back hits the ground. I'm like, boom, you're not stuck there. So what's your actual fucking problem? And they'll be like, my back hurts. I'm like, cool. So now let's actually address the actual fucking problem, because there's so many things that could contribute to that. And maybe the position of your pelvis in some things, maybe it's contributing and we can make changes there. But just this whole, oh, I have anterior pelvic tilt, therefore it's a fucking problem. Like, what? You worried about doing some freak athletic shit? It's not happening in fucking sway back.
Yeah, no, it's true. So many athletes do have that natural anterior pelvic tilt. And I mean, with these athletes, with these athletes, it's like they've got a certain anatomical structure. It's like, why would you want to change them? Like their anatomical structure has contributed to making them who they are as an athlete. Like, don't change that. You're going to ruin them. Even with when it comes to movement, oftentimes athletes, the good athletes, are the exceptions to the rule. They don't necessarily have the sprint mechanics that the textbook would say. They don't necessarily move in the perfect textbook way. Well, because they're the outliers, they're the freaks, they're the exceptions to the rule. And great athletes are master compensators when it comes to compensating for asymmetries or deficiencies. And sometimes you just got to let the freaks be freaks and not touch it.
I think a lot of the time as well, people aren't super clear on where the end of the lumbar spine is. And a lot of the people, they will say, who are like super lordotic, what they're really looking at is a lordotic lower T-spine. which again, you can make your own sort of value judgment on that, whether you like it or not. But yeah, I think a lot of the time when people are like, oh, I'm overly lordotic in my lumbar, I'm like, that's not what I'm seeing. I'm actually seeing a lumbar that's probably flatter than you think. But you've just got this lordotic curve from your sacrum to the base of your neck.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then I think a lot of people, again, it comes down to like wanting to provide value. There's, practitioners out there who want to impose this problem on you that they have the solution to. Like, oh, you're in the anterior pelvic tilt. I can fix that.
And it's a good one because there's a lot of potential customers out there.
Yeah, absolutely there are. All right, so the last point on your list of 10 training trends that need to die, sharing your 3-hour morning routine.
Do you have a 3-hour morning routine? Nah, so I was big on the Hormozy morning routine, which is wake up and open your laptop. And that served me so well, but then since my locking in arc, I've developed a bit of a cutesy sort of morning routine. I'm like, you have to have a moment for yourself. So I live in a beautiful area, so I like to make myself coffee, eat some breakfast, walk down to the beach and sort of take in some morning sun or something like that and sort of ease into my day a little bit more, sort of start my day on a little bit less of a high anxiety, sort of tense, looking at spreadsheets or fucking reading comment sections and stuff like that. So I have developed a little bit more of a morning routine, but it's not to the point of who's that guy on Instagram who's like the morning routine world champion. Have you seen? He's an absolute legend. Like what a chat. He's just fucking, the hot girls are handing him his clothes and his bottle of water that he's washing his face in. Like, I kind of love that guy.
Yeah, right now my morning routine is waking up to a screaming newborn and then immediately putting out those fires and changing a diaper and then scrambling to prepare my food. And I've got a million emails coming in. But no, your morning routine, you need to wake up, immediately get into an ice cold shower, get 10-15 minutes of sun exposure staring directly into the sun, and don't touch caffeine for 120 minutes. Now, I will say, actually, I have done
any of that stuff for granted right now because I want to have a family at a certain point, and I'm like, I know that all of this, I'm not going to be able to have it one day because there's going to be a higher cause. I look at my brother and I enjoy it now. Like,
yeah, no, I will say the life we now have, being able to set our own schedule, it is much more conducive to a family life. When that's the big reason I stepped away from strength and conditioning. You're just working endless hours at the facility and whereas now I can actually be at home and be present. And, if I need to move some of my schedule around, I have the freedom to do so. So it's been a great move stepping into the private sector. And now no one fucking tells me what to do. No one tells me what to say. I have full autonomy in what I program, the content I put out, and how I live my life. It's beautiful.
See, I've come back from this thing of like living a maximally flexible lifestyle because of a lot of those things you said, but you've come from that really disciplined, rigid part, whereas like I've realized I need a little bit more self-imposed routine and stuff like that, and trying to just be a bit more of my own boss. Because again, I always sort of hated the idea of having people to tell me what to do, but now I sort of understand. I'm like, oh right, like accountability, yeah, like there's structure and routine.
It's a good point. And in ways I did thrive off of structure. It keeps you in line, right? You've got a schedule, you've got places you need to be, deadlines you need to make, all those things. At least now, like I've got a wife and a baby, so that has like built-in responsibility and accountability within the day. And I've got to be able to, organize my day and my work around all of that. But yeah, it can be a dangerous thing, just getting total flexibility and freedom, because now there's not that sense of urgency to get things done. Right now, it's completely on you to hold yourself accountable, and that some people do go to shit when that happens.
Well, it's not only because the outputs are low, but it's just like, and I know that this is like a utopian fantasy that doesn't actually exist in the workplace when you have a boss, but like, hit me the other day how much I just needed someone to tell me when I've done a good job. I'm like, oh, yeah, right. It's on me to tell myself that. just like as a self-critical person, like I think a lot of people don't have that built-in software. So for you, and yeah, for anyone who works for themselves listening to this, I hope you tell yourself that you're doing a good job occasionally. And I hope you tell yourself, it's like, okay, job's done for the day, tools down, and let's go. Because again, no one else is going to do that for you.
Well, I'll be one to tell you you've done a very good job. I've been very much a fan of the content you put out. I think you put out content that is both entertaining yet very informative. So it's good stuff. You're a good voice of reason out in the in this industry where there's so much misinformation and so much dogma. So I very much appreciated the stuff that you're putting out, which is why I wanted to have you on today.
Oh, thanks, mate. I really appreciate it. This is an awesome conversation. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, same here. Well, we're rounding out here over an hour and a half, so I'm going to let you go and get started with your day. And as my night is coming to an end here on different sides of the world, so where can people find you?
Just check out the Instagram. So there's a YouTube channel, there's a podcast, but you can get links all to that just if you start out with the Instagram. Also follow my other account, General Physical Preparation. There's a bit more educational content, and there's a hell of a lot of memes that hopefully will make you laugh and make your day a little bit better.
Yeah, guys, go check out Angus on Instagram. Check out his podcast. Smart guy, a lot of good, entertaining, but high quality information there. Stay tuned every week, guys. We're going to have more episodes coming out every Tuesday with guest episodes on the podcast. My website just went live, hammerchiselperformance.com. We've got some programs, ebooks, and my coaching services for sale on there. So go to the website, check that out. But anyway, guys, I appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you next week. Angus Bradley, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
All right, guys.